Hi folks, I have your latest real estate numbers for you. In this video, I'm focusing on Vaughan and Richmond Hill for week ending November 22nd, and I'm going to break down detached and condo prices, and we got some really crazy things to talk about when it comes to the detached prices. If you're interested in the Toronto market, there's going to be a link up here. You could check out that video, and I really get into detail for the Toronto market. Okay, let's get started. Actually, before we go on, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell button so you're reminded of these videos, and share them. And if you have questions or comments on what we're talking about, please leave them below. Really appreciate it. Okay, so Vaughan detached prices. And if you're joining us for the first time, I basically am breaking down the market and average sold prices and sales on a weekly basis. And I've started here just the first week of March, because over here in middle of March and April is when we were in our lockdown. And I've kind of taken prices from there and seeing which way they've gone and looking at trends. And before we went into the lockdown, we were breaking records. We were on such a high when it came to prices before the lockdown, and I just thought it would be really, really interesting to see what happens coming out of the lockdown, and it surprised everybody. So, for week ending November 22nd, sales have come down a bit. In Vaughan, there was 36 detached homes sold that week, and sales should be tapering down as we get into colder months. It's just normal, seasonal. As we get into colder months, sales do tend to come down. Average sold price normally does come down, and that's just something we see every single year. But this year is anything but a typical year. So the yellow here are the amount of properties that have sold at $2 million or more. Before we went into the lockdown, we were sitting at 6, so 7, 8, those are kind of the weeks that we tend to do a bit better. But here we're at 4, not bad. Average sold price jumped way up from the previous week, and if I could just erase the previous week here, it's just abnormal that we had such a drop in average sold price. But if we sit back and kind of look at the trend, we came out of the lockdown here and got really strong. Then it settled in a little bit for a few months here in August. But since the ending of August and the beginning of September, average sold price has generally been going up quite a bit, actually. Over here we're sitting at around 1.4. Up here now we're at 1.6, over 1.6 million for the average sold price of a detached home in Vaughan. Those are our record prices. If we forget about the previous week here, the previous 2 weeks, the 1.6 kind of is in line on the trajectory of where prices were headed. So what's going to happen in the next few months is time will tell, but it's incredible how strong the detached market is in Vaughan. When we compare to last year, the orange is 2020, the blue is 2019 average sold prices. We're almost 23% higher than what we were this time last year. The previous week where we had that big drop, it's the reverse. We're 5% lower, but when we look at the weeks before that, we're 20% higher, 24.9, 29.2, some incredible increases in average sold price over the previous year. If we're looking at sales, well, we've been, for a good part of the last few months, we've been selling more detached properties than we did last year. Remember, we're just talking about Vaughan right now. But over the last few weeks, you could see that we're kind of on par to the same activity that we were doing last year, the same sales. But listings, we are listing more detached homes than we've been last year. And when we look at months of inventory, and months of inventory is really the best tool we have to kind of measure supply and demand, we're sitting at 2.7 months of inventory. Usually when months of inventory go up, prices tend to come down. In this case, price jumped up, but it's not an exact science, and sometimes there is a delay of 1 week or two on either side. But the fact that we've gone up to 1.6 kind of, like I said earlier, is in line to where prices were headed. Now, are they going to go higher? Are they going to stabilize lower? We'll see, but we've had a pretty solid run for detached homes in Vaughan. Looking at Richmond Hill, you know what? We're seeing similar situation here. Last week, we sold 20 detached homes. Price jumped up. The previous week was a bit abnormal that it was so low. I'm not, you know what? Sometimes there's a lull in the system, and for whatever reason, that particular week, things kind of slow down. So that's why we try to look at the trend of things. And overall, since the beginning of August, prices have generally been going up. And the average sold price, if you look at this and you kind of say, you know, 1.6, 1.650 or so is the average, what it would cost to buy the average detached home in Richmond Hill. You'd be right. That's kind of where the number is there. Compared to last year, for this 1 week, we're almost 4% higher than we were last year. But if we go back just a few weeks, we're at 27%, 21%. There's some big gains versus where we were last year. When it comes to sales, earlier on, we were selling a lot more than what we did last year. And again, just talking for Richmond Hill in this one here, but we're kind of on par, and for the last couple of weeks, we've been actually selling less than what we sold last year. Listings, it's pretty even compared to what we were listing last year. Months of inventory, this is really interesting here. For the 1 week, months of inventory have shot up to 4.6 months of inventory. That puts us in a balanced market type of situation. Less than 4 months is a seller's market. More than 6 months of inventory is a buyer's market. But in between the 4 to 6 months, we're saying it's a balanced market. And that's kind of where we are now. And basically, because of that, we should see prices taper off a little bit. But it's really tough to say what's going on. If I just go back a little bit, there were 20 properties sold, but there were available for sale almost 400. That's how we calculate that there's 4.6 months of inventory. So it's not a terrible market. It's not overly where we should see prices come down, but like I said, it's more of a balanced market. Okay, let's talk about condos. Now, it's a little bit tricky when we talk about condos in Vaughan and Toronto, just because the volume of sales aren't there. So 1 or 2 sales can really skew the numbers one way or another. But let's have a look at what's happening here. We only sold, for week ending November 22nd, 5 condos in all of Vaughan. And there's a ton of condos in Vaughan, but only 5 were sold. When we look back, the last time we were doing 5 a week, that was when we were in lockdown. We were doing 2, 3, 4, 5 during a lockdown period. And that's the kind of sales we did last week. And that really hurts the condo market. So when we look at prices and we kind of step back and see which way prices are going. Well, a few weeks before that, we were pretty high here at $688,000. But for 2 weeks in a row, they've come down, and the average sold price is shot way down at $540,000. But when you look at the overall trend, they're kind of, you know, it's not like we can say, oh yeah, we could see it going down or we can see it going up. We could see it, it's pretty predominant in the detached market, which way prices are going over a period of time. But here, they're bouncing up and down. And a lot of that has to do with, let me tell you, prices in condos are coming down. But what's happening right now is there's a lot of well, they're not pre-construction anymore, but condos that were purchased pre-construction a few years ago that are now coming into closing, and buyers are selling these. Well, these condos are more expensive than, say, some of the older condos that are on the market, and that kind of helps to boost up the average sold price. But people have bought these pre-construction condos at $800, $900, $1,000 a square foot. Some of them are selling them a little bit less than that. So they're not all making money. So prices have come down a little bit. Compared to last year, again, it's really tough to say because of the volumes that we're doing here, but last week we were 15% lower than last year's average sold price. A few weeks before that, some crazy numbers here, 22.7, 33.6 as far as average sold price, 33.6% higher than last year's average sold price. When it comes to sales, there's no question. Remember, the orange is 2020, the blue is 2019. There's no question we're not selling anywhere near the amount of condos we sold last year in Vaughan. And when it comes to listings, we are listing way more condos than we were listing last year. 5 were purchased. There were 292 available for sale. What do you think that does to months of inventory? Well, we kind of got to look way up. For last week, there was 13.4 months of inventory, over a year months of inventory when it comes to condos in Vaughan. Should we see prices heading down? For sure. It's not like before that we're in a seller's market. For months and months now, we've been in a balance or a buyer's market. But I should warn you, it really also kind of depends. There's micro markets. Depending on which condo you're looking at, you might find a ton of them for sale or only 1 or 2. And if it's a building where there's only 1 or 2 for sale and buyers want to be in that building, they're going to compete still. Richmond Hill, similar story. This is just condos for Richmond Hill. Only 4 were purchased. So in Vaughan, there were 5. Sales dropped from the previous week. The same thing that happened in Richmond Hill, only 4. And 4 are the, well, actually, it looks like we were doing better during lockdown in buying condos than we are for last week ending. Average sold price has gone up actually for the last couple of weeks, where now the average sold price in Richmond Hill for a condo is $570,000. And it's still lower for most of the year than what it was pre-lockdown price. But you can kind of see the average price here going down a little bit. Compared to last year, for this 1 week, November 22nd, we're almost 20% higher than last year's average sold price. But don't take it as your condo's worth 20% more. That's not the case. And if you look over the last few weeks, prices flipped back and forth between higher than last year's, lower than last year's. Sales, we've been selling less almost every single week than what we've been selling last year. And for the last few weeks, it's considerably less. When it comes to listings, same story. It's the same story we're seeing in Vaughan, across York region, across the GTA in Toronto. We are buying less condos this year than last year, but we're listing more coming onto the market. Months of inventory for Richmond Hill condos, 11.2 months of inventory. Average sold price did go up, where it should be coming down when we have this much choice out there. But it all depends. When you're talking about only 4 sales, it could be actually lower. It depends on which condos were purchased. And 1 or 2 condos are a little bit more expensive, brings the price up, or vice versa. That's the report for Vaughan and Richmond Hill. Detached homes are out of control. Prices seems to be going up and up and up. Condos, the numbers don't show it, but prices are coming down for the average condo. My name is Santo Sessa with Remax Premier. Just a reminder again, subscribe below and hit the bell button. We'll talk to you soon. We got the Toronto report coming up in a few days.